So glad to see such a full, enthusiastic audience here tonight for our talk. I am Dr. Kim Dismont Robinson. I am the director of the Department of Culture. I am delighted to welcome you all, to the annual, and we're at the 15th annual now, Robinson Packwood Memorial Lecture. I'd like to acknowledge the Robinson Pearman family here in the front row, particularly Mrs. Shirley Pearman, the daughter of Dr. Kenneth E. Robinson. Part of the reason why the department established this lecture is because we wanted to acknowledge the very significant contributions of two remarkable Bermudian historians, Dr. Kenneth E. Robinson, the author of Heritage, and Mr. Cyril Outerbridge Packwood, the author of Chained on the Rock. This lecture series is intended to focus on a subject related to the histories of the African diaspora. At times we have had Bermudian lecturers. At other times we have invited lecturers from abroad, but the idea is to celebrate the diaspora and to recognize the contributions. This particular lecture is, we're quite delighted to have partnered with the Bermuda National Gallery for this. Thank you to Ms. Jennifer Phillips for being such a wonderful partner. I think that our lecture tonight will likely give some of the background behind how this came to be, but suffice to say that we are thrilled that this is a project that he had agreed to take on for the gallery, and the Department of Culture has been delighted to be able to assist and to sponsor. I would like to introduce you. The title of this lecture, Eyes Wide Open, the awe and delight in all of us everywhere, Lessons from Richard Saunders, an extraordinary Bermudian photojournalist, what we consider in the department a gold Bermudian, someone who has performed extraordinarily well on the international stage. Tonight, the lecture will be given by Mr. Yusef Bushara. Mr. Bushara is a recent graduate from the Sciences Po and University of Hong Kong, where he studied political humanities and English literature. He's a passionate writer whose work roots itself in the telling of delight and discovery, of love, of hope, and of promise. The themes of his writing are deeply inspired by his upbringing here in Bermuda. Currently, he's working on a book of poetry, essayettes, and vignette-style prose entitled Good News, that explores the importance of choosing to delight despite the busyness of our daily lives. In the fall, he will be completing his master's degree in comparative literature at SOAS University in London. We are delighted to have with us today Mr. Yusef Bushara.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Yusef Bushara, and I'll be giving the talk tonight called Eyes Wide Open, the awe and delight in all of us, everywhere, Lessons from Richard Saunders. And I'm so excited and grateful to be sharing this space with all of you. I took on this project about 2 summers ago, and I had no idea who Richard Saunders was. So to be in this position now and to be able to give a presentation on some of the ways that he's inspired me, it's really wonderful. So thank you all. And one special shout out I'd like to give is to my friend Adrian, who just flew in from Toronto by way of Hong Kong today. So if you have the chance, say hi to Adrian and welcome him to Bermuda, please. So in the initial press release for this talk, I was mistakenly called Dr. Yusef Bushara, which made me laugh when my dad told me because I didn't see the radio announcement. So if you're still inclined to listen to a non-doctor speak for the next 30 minutes, I promise you that this is the event for you. I also don't plan on doing a traditional lecture, not one without pauses at risk of putting you all to sleep. So please indulge my interactive games or my theatrics. I want to make this as entertaining as possible. If you just came in, please find your seat. You should all have a sticky note and a pen. So wave your sticky note and pen in the air if you have one, because we all need those. And if you don't have one, there's wonderful Hannah. Say hi to Hannah, everyone. And wonderful Aaliyah downstairs. Say hi to Aaliyah. Without Hannah and Aaliyah and Miss Phillips, Miss Jennifer Phillips, and Dr. Dismond Robinson, none of this at all would be possible. So this talk is as much my talk as it is theirs. So thank you to you all. And thank you to the legacies of Dr. Kenneth E. Robinson and Mr. Cyril Packwood. Because of the work that they did, we're here today. So I began this research, like I said, in the summer of 2023 in collaboration with the National Gallery and the Department of Culture. And the vision for this project was to create a coffee table book on the life, the work, and the legacy of Richard Saunders. And so that's what we're doing. That's what we've been doing for the past 2 years. We've been trying to look at Saunders' portfolio and find a way to describe the most primary themes. And the theme that I've been drawn to and that I'm drawn to in my life is delay. How can we find a way to express the small moments that make us the most happy? So this exhibition that the gallery put on 2 years ago was called A Personal Perspective, and it was actually held right downstairs in the Ondaatje room. And there were 17 pictures that the gallery exhibited. If you didn't have the fortune or the pleasure to see this exhibition, I saw it quite late. There is a virtual tour online that I really recommend everyone go see after this talk is finished. I have every intention to follow a plan for this evening, but I welcome any deviations that you might be inspired to follow. So if you have a question, a comment, a concern, a curiosity, please don't hesitate to interrupt. Part of the plan for tonight is to spark a discussion on the significance of awe and delay, one that hopefully extends beyond the space and the time that we have now, one that will seep into the conversations for the days to come, and one inspired by the work of Richard Clive Saunders. My promise, because I believe it's important for us to be accountable to something during these events, so we can come and we can leave and we have something to remember. My promise for tonight is that we'll leave here with more questions on delight, where to find it, and why delight is important, and that we'll also leave here with a sharper ability to notice the small details that bring us to delay every single day. I was in the kitchen yesterday doing preparation for this talk, and my dad walks in and he says, Sandy is my mother, hello mother, and he says, Sandy, run outside, come. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And I walk outside and there's the most beautiful rainbow that I've seen in a very long time. I don't know if anybody else saw the rainbow, but it was quite the special event. So this is what I mean by delight, finding moments every day to pause and to say, you know, it is a blessing amidst the turmoil, amidst the grief. It's a blessing to be alive, especially here in Bermuda. So I want to go and search for beauty tonight. I want to find that pot of gold that my mom was looking for yesterday. And I'll need all of your help. I want to find beauty with everybody in this room. And Saunders, luckily, Saunders is going to be all of our teachers because he was my teacher and he has been my teacher for the past 2 years. I'd like to think that Saunders and I have formed a friendship. And I've spent a lot more time with Saunders than a lot of my friends for these past couple of years. And for that, I am sorry. I've been busy. Saunders and I, we both value the creative output that comes from paying close attention. I appreciate people like Saunders who dare to be specific, to be random, and to express what makes them happy. And my sister is a wonderful example of expressing the random things that make her happy. So if you have free time tomorrow night, go check her out at Birdcage at 6 p.m. The reason I use the word paying is because I recognize that we're indebted to the beauty of our surroundings here in Bermuda and the lessons they hold for us. So many of my principles and the way I carry myself is because of my family, of course, but also because of the lessons that I've noticed here around our island. And I'll speak to the finesse and the slowness of Bermudians a bit later on. So seeking to delay and choosing to report on delay through this talk and through my writing is the currency I've chosen to repay this debt. But there are so many ways that you can pay back your debt of notice. And Aaron Critchlow is one person here in this room that I appreciate and admire very much. He's in the back. A lot of tonight is just going to be shout-outs. I'm so sorry. But Aaron Critchlow, he is the founder, one of the co-founders of Bermuda is Love, and that is the currency he's chosen to repay his delight in Bermuda. So there are so many ways for us to go about this work of delight. I've chosen to write. That's what I enjoy. That's what I think I'm okay at. But everybody has a different way of going about repaying this debt that I feel we owe. So tonight is about remembering how Saunders loved the world. It's about photography, although I don't know much about photography. It's It's about highlighting the ability to take pictures with your heart. On such matters, Maya Angelou, one of my favorite poets, she said that good writing slides from your brain straight to your heart. And I'd argue that good photography does the same thing, but it starts with the eyes. So good photography starts with the eyes and it slides straight to your heart. And that's something that I want all of us to keep in mind for today. If you walked in and you noticed the easels, you'll see 3 of the works that were exhibited in a personal perspective about 2 years ago. And these are 3 works that we're going to comment on. I have a special surprise for 3 people in this room, so I hope you're a bit excited. The reason I mention these photos is because they're exquisite. I've seldom come across photos that inspire me to feel the way these pictures have made me feel. But I mention it again because it's really easy to become overstimulated when you're looking at so much beautiful art, when you're looking at photography where you don't necessarily understand the message. And so you have a photo of Terence Stamp and James Brown and a nurse. And it's really hard to draw out the meaning sometimes. And so I found myself during this research trying to create stories for these pictures. Stories sometimes that were a bit far-fetched because I didn't have the necessary context, but other times stories that I felt were quite appropriate to the pictures that I was looking at. And so in order to find the precise language, which is often the most difficult battle, but in order to find the precise language with which to describe his portfolio, sometimes I'd have to relinquish some sort of control. I'd have to say, I'll never understand what Saunders was thinking or why he decided to frame a picture this way, and I have to create the story myself. I have to do the work of fiction, of fabrication, and say, okay, this is what I believe. And I think it's only once I accepted my voice more completely that the descriptions that I was writing for each of his pictures became couched in a deeper sense of honesty. So I learned to find delight by opening myself up to telling the wrong stories. That's the point of this. I told so many wrong stories, and I'll continue to tell wrong stories for the rest of my life, but still stories that mattered to me. By telling stories which match the drama of his images and the drama of my imagination. When I'm reading a coffee table book, the thing that strikes me oftentimes is when I see a caption that matches the feeling that's welling up inside of me when I'm looking at a picture. So what I tried to accomplish throughout the descriptions I was writing for Saunders' pictures is having a drama in my head that matched the drama of his imagination as well, even if I didn't have all of the necessary historical details. So in the spirit of trusting my own interpretations, I came across a concept a couple months ago called false etymology. Does anyone know what false etymology is? That's okay. So false etymology is a concept that I learned from an American poet named Ross Gay. And he uses false etymology as a way to reconstruct words or deconstruct words, rather, according to meanings that he makes up himself. This is a way for him to see the world in a different light. He was the one who pointed out a new meaning for the word delight. And delight has a real origin. It comes from the Latin word delectare, which means to charm, the same origin as the word delectable. And what Gay did with the word delight was break it down into 2 parts. He took de, which for those of you who took middle school French or Spanish, de often means of, and he said, okay, I'm going to keep de and I'm going to put it over here. De is in this camp. And he said, I'm going to take de and I'm going to keep the English word for light because it's easier for him. And so he said, okay, I have de and I have light. And what does that mean to him? He said, delights are moments from and of light, which is exactly how they feel to me. It was the most intuitive definition of delight that I had probably ever read. And I didn't need to check the dictionary anymore because that's what delight was. And I thought it was quite poetic. So I want everybody to try and take words from their own repertoire, and I want you to remix them when nobody asks you to. I want you to take words and I want you to flip them on their head, and I want you to say, okay, this word meant this to my mother or to me a couple days ago, but now it means this. And I think delight is a wonderful word that you can do that with. So remember, de means of and light means light. So moments from light, glimmerings. Not just Ross Gay, but a lot of the examples I cite today are going to be from my favorite writers because I'm a broken record. And Toni Morrison is one of my favorite writers who wrote an incredible essay back in 1995 called The Sight of Memory. I recommend everyone read The Site of Memory at some point. And in The Site of Memory, she explores how Black writers write fiction as a way to situate personal histories in the realm of truth. And the reason she did this is because many Black people in the world, especially in the US, in the UK, we don't have access to the necessary historical records to fill out a personal history. So we've had to do this work of creativity and of fiction in order to conceptualize how conversations might have gone, or what geographies might have been, or how our relationships were. And so she does this work of fiction, but she doesn't equate the word fiction with falsehood. Her fiction is a way of excavating the truth. And I think that's what Delight is for me as well. It's a way of excavating the truth here in Bermuda, the truth of beautiful things and beautiful moments. So I realized that these imagined details that Morrison writes about, she wanted to be a custodian, She wanted to be a custodian for unwritten histories, and she believed that she could do it in large part through this act of writing fiction. Her history, for her, had to straddle the imaginary and the real. And being able to imagine how her ancestors approached life was fundamental to her experience of delight. Because to delight for her was to first recognize that all of us inherit a paradigm from which we reflect on joy and grief. Delight is not the absence of bad moments in our life. Delight is the silver lining in a bad moment. So if unfortunate experience come our way, delight is a way to find relief. That's what delight is for me. It's a momentary relief, and if you can do the necessary work of working on your delight, this momentary relief can be extended. So Morrison's case is one that many of us in this room can relate to, where our joy is tangled in the adversity of our ancestors. In the spirit of this emancipation event, because that's what we're here to celebrate, emancipation, we're here for freedom, it's important to remind ourselves that choosing to delay is not only a choice for us, but for all of those who have come before us. Delight keeps us buoyant when the legacy of trauma tries to drag us low, and our heritage in Bermuda is born out of creating magic from very little. We have no resources here. We've had to become creative. One of my favorite examples of Bermudian ingenuity is fish chowder. To me, all it is fish guts and glory, and if I knew half of the things that were in fish chowder, I probably would not eat it. Like Toni Morrison, we take the ingredients that we've been given and we carry them alongside our imaginations into the realm of truth and tradition. We straddle the imaginary and the real when we find ourselves dancing to a gum baby neighborhoods away. Neighborhoods away because even when we can't see delight, we must imagine it, and we must tap our toes to its rhythm. During the daytime, when this gallery is open, right there on that computer screen, there's a beautiful short documentary by Dion Easton. And if you've had the time to come in and watch the documentary, you'll know how beautiful our gumbays are. That's a delight for me. Coming in here and watching that documentary, taking time out and saying, wow, okay, we've done so much with the little that we have. So find moments like this, find time like this to set some delight out for yourself. So in that light, we must take photographs, write poems, sing songs, greet people. We must do all of these things and imagine for a moment that we're experiencing a joy that someone else has in the past and that someone else will in the future. That's what connects us, the fact that delight is a recyclable thing. It's a disposition that invites new ways of processing the mundane. Saunders and I, we became friends through our habit of breaking down the mundane into smaller, more captivating moments. Looking at his images and recognizing that they represent a mosaic of human emotion, and to accept the fact that as a viewer, we're always going to be grasping at just a bit of what those emotions are. My job as a researcher, first and foremost, has been to find a loose thread and to unravel it, to find a loose thread in the way of a story, or if I've been interviewing people, to find a loose thread and to let them speak their truth. In a lot of the interviews I've done, the focus has been Saunders, but the outcome has been a personal deep dive into why, for example, Miss Jade Gibbons started photography or how that happened. So the point of doing research on Saunders is not to produce a biographical account of his life, which will happen inevitably, but it's to find something deeper in his intentions as a photographer and as an artist that we can all connect to. This research has also been so much about faith, and I don't mean religious faith, I mean belief in the fact that I'll always be able to find beautiful things and beautiful moments. And without faith, delight becomes impossible to consistently find. We have to believe that there are always positive notes to track down. And although Saunders is gone, his legacy of finding delight has etched itself into the fabric of my habits. Interacting with his work has created so many sources of wonder for me that I'll share with you later on. And like I said, one of the most gratifying parts of this research has been interviewing the people that I've had the pleasure of meeting for the first time, or sitting them down in a new context and asking them about why they do what they do. The rest of this talk I'd like to dedicate to these people. So if I've had the chance to interview you, I should say, I want to take this time to thank you. So Mr. Caesar in the back, thank you. Can we give you a round of applause? I don't know where Jade is. When I looked, I couldn't find her, but Jade Gibbons as well. Let's give her a small round of applause. Hi, Jade. Miss Aisha Townsend right there. We didn't interview about Richard Saunders, but she inspired a lot of the delight that I'm speaking about today, so thank you. And the list goes on. But all of these people and people that I didn't mention, you're the reason that we're having this conversation today, and hopefully the reason that we'll be having this conversation for the weeks and months and years to come. Because that's how long this work takes to really soak up in our bones, right? Delight is not an Instagram reel that we'll forget about in a couple of days. Delight is something that we can practice until the day we die. And that's the way I've convinced myself of this mission, of this purpose. It's what I live for. So before we continue, before we get into the beef of this lecture, and you must be like, wow, we're not almost done. I'm sorry. Before we get into the rest of the lecture, I want to give you guys a menu so you know what's to come. I'm going to briefly explain the emergence of Saunders as a photographer. I'm going to tell you a bit about his life. We'll then examine the role of the artist in shaping awe and delight. We'll talk about how awe and delight can become practices and not just airy-fairy terms that I throw around every once in a while. We'll look at some of Saunders' work, which is pictured down here. We'll look at 3 images, and that's when we'll use our sticky notes to articulate and to conceptualize what it is we find delightful specifically about the images. I'll explain the technical side of silver print photography, and if there's any photographers in the room, I'm going to point the questions that may arise in that section toward you, because I don't know much about photography. And then finally, we'll finish this conversation with a discussion on Bermuda's youth, how we can keep Bermuda's creative youth and youth in general here to help shape delight for generations and generations to come. I like to call this generation a budding generation of awe finders and delight seekers, because that's what we are. When we take a picture and we post it on Instagram, or we have a conversation with a friend or a sibling about something that we enjoyed, we're delight seekers. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Saunders was born in 1922 and grew up in Spanish Point on Seagull Lane. He died in 1987 at the age of 65 due to complications with diabetes. If he were in this room today, which in spirit he is, he'd be 102. And this talk is quite fitting and it's quite timely because yesterday marks the 37th anniversary of his death. If there's anyone in the room who grew up in Spanish Point during the first half of the 20th century, you'll know what jail knots are. And I learned this from Miss Shirley Pierman, and I had no idea what jail knots are. And jail in this case is spelled G-O-A-L. So if you ever see goal knots written down, you have Miss Shirley Pierman to thank. So jail knots are concrete bricks that used to line the roads in Spanish Point. And I was told in our interview that they were better suited for horses and carriages than humans in cars. And because of this, people in Bermuda were inclined to walk more, at least in Spanish Point. When people get around primarily on foot, they have more time to pay attention to the ground that they're walking on. These days, we only notice the road when we've hit a pothole, or 2 or 3 or 4 of them, as it seems to be these days. I found a lot of joy in this anecdote when I was speaking to Miss Pierman last summer. It was actually quite a dramatic moment. We were in a kitchen, and there was lightning and rain, and I thought I was never going to make it out alive because there was a lot going on. So thank you for welcoming me into your house during those conditions. I'd also like to give Ms. Pierman a special mention, like I said, because it's her father whom we're commemorating tonight alongside. Hello, Jala. Hello, Leona. It's good to see you. Alongside Mr. Cyril Packwood. So thank you for living in their legacy and for speaking so fondly of their influence on you. People in Spanish Point and around the island prided themselves on walking. Walking to get to know each other, walking to get to know the island, walking for the sake of walking. I don't have an agenda on walking. I love walking myself. It's something that I got from my parents. But if you do have the time to go for a walk, do it. You'll see so many things that will inspire you. You'll look at a chicken in a new light and be like, wow, I want to write a poem about this chicken now. It's really silly behavior, you know. I don't know how to put it. If you want to read more on the importance of walking, I recommend this book. It's called Walking, One Step at a Time, and it's by Erling Kagge. It was a gift that I got at Christmas time last year. So I'm going to pass it around, but please, please, please make sure it comes back this way or to somebody related to me. So I'm going to pass it around. I'll start over here. And I want everybody to take a look, read something, take a line, write it down, but just please, please make sure it gets back to me because it's very special. There was a time in Bermuda when we kept tabs on who was coming in and out of our neighborhoods, who was doing what and where. There was an intimacy formed by, yes, pokiness, but also care. And I think the best occupation for someone who likes spending time in another person's business is photography. I'm surprised more Bermudians aren't photographers. Bermuda hasn't grown big enough since Saunders' time to justify the apprehensiveness we've learned to adopt toward each other. That's something that I've seen a lot in the past 4 or 5 years coming home in between my visits to school. We've lost a touch of our warmth. I see people in the gym in the morning and we're afraid to speak to each other. People don't want to say hello. They have their headphones on. They're walking like they're in New York City or Hong Kong, where I was for the past couple of years. And I recognize a disconnect between the Bermuda that we live in now in terms of our hospitality and the Bermuda that raised all of us in this room, because we're all of that age where we remember a different Bermuda. So I want to bring back some of that care and some of that warmth, and I think a lot of that stems or can be helped by delay. If we're able to reach out of ourselves and see something that makes us emotional, we'll be able to share that with somebody else, or we'll be compelled to share that with somebody else, and that person might reciprocate and be like, wow, let me tell you something about my day too, you know? So that's what I'm trying to get at here. We must learn again to delight in each other's presence and to show our care. Very, very simply. To many, Saunders was known as Clive. Miss Pierman was one of them. And though she was a young girl when Clive was an adult, she remembered him coming back to the neighborhood from overseas and saying hello to everyone. She described him in our interview last year as larger than life, a person who emanated delight at every single turn, which I think is such a wonderful way to describe somebody. She also told me that he had large hands, and with a lot of the people that I've interviewed for this project, they told me that Saunders had very, very large hands. And I think there's a curious study to be done between the artist and the hands, because a lot of the artists that I love, they also have very, very large hands. So if anyone knows anything about the relationship between those things, come find me after the talk. As a child, when I encountered young adults, I was captivated by the ones who had some finesse. My father is somebody who I think has a lot of finesse, and it kind of inspires me to be easygoing with the people around me, or at least try to. This finesse is something for me that is a way of entering my childhood world seamlessly while not straying too far from their adult world. It's, again, straddling the imaginary and the real, like I was talking about with Miss Toni Morrison. I thought their coolness was one that I'd hopefully get to inherit with age. I'm yet to find out if that's the case. But to a young me, finesse made adults feel eternal. And I imagine that's how many children in Spanish Point experience Saunders when he'd come home in between assignments. As I get older, I've realized that a lot of that finesse was just kindness. A lot of what we have to do is just kindness. Bermudians don't have finesse. Bermudians are kind first and foremost. So remember that. Anytime you go out, remember to be kind, remember to be yourself. Remember that if you think you have finesse, you're probably just being a nice person. Saunders temporarily moved back to Bermuda in his teenage years, having moved to Boston with his family at the age of 8. He tried to find work with the Trade Development Board. Does anyone know what the Trade Development Board is now? I did not know that. Thank you. But he was unsuccessful, as many businesses and companies at the time didn't want to hire Black employees. Again, we are here because of emancipation and for freedom. He eventually landed a job, with David Knudsen, I think that's how you, pardon? One more time, Mom? Yes, thank you, Knudsen. My mom is an educator, and she just educated me once more. So he landed a job with David Knudsen at the camera store on Queen Street, but he wasn't there for long. He also worked as a forensic photographer with the police for a little while, I think at the same time. But he eventually said, you know what, enough is enough. I don't want to live in a segregated Bermuda. I'm going to move to greener pastures. And he said, okay. And he and his wife, Emily Saunders, moved to New York in 1945 so that Saunders could study at the Modern Photography School in Brooklyn, at Brooklyn College. And so we spent a few years here, and he spent a lot of his time in Harlem, and he was rubbing shoulders with folk in Harlem. And while doing this, he met Gordon Parks, who was working for Life magazine at the time, I believe. And in working with Gordon Parks, he saw his career take off. Gordon Parks also sponsored his American visa. And I think when I find out details like this, I'm really inspired because Bermudians know how to get themselves in the right crowds. Maybe it's because of the finesse that we were speaking about a bit earlier. So it was Parks who landed Saunders his first major assignment with Roy Stryker, who was at the time working for the FSA on the photography project. He was the one who hired the photographer that took the picture of Dorothy Lange during the Great Depression, I believe. So this was his end. He said, okay, let me seize this opportunity and do what I know how to do best, which is take beautiful pictures. And so he eventually moved to Pittsburgh for a project under Roy Stryker's name. And this was the Pittsburgh Project, it was called, and he was documenting the redevelopment and the urbanization of Pittsburgh. And one thing that Saunders always did was spend time in a place before he photographed anybody. So all of the people that you see, with the exception of James Brown, I guess, Saunders knew, or at least he'd had a conversation with them. He had met somebody's mother or sister and said, okay, can I introduce myself to your world? Can I take a picture? And I think that's something that's very important when you're trying to capture something real and something raw, having proximity to the delight that you hope to engender. In his words, the goal of his photography was to tie the human factor, the human drama, in with the technical aspects of film, to make it exciting and interesting for the viewer. When Saunders took pictures, he didn't intervene in lives so much as he interrogated the truth behind them with his lens. He approached the life with the least intention to exploit it. He approached the life to slow it down. Slow it down so that his audience could reaffirm the humanity of the subjects being captured. And that brings me to plate number 2 on our menu, and that's the role of the artist. What is the role of the artist? And there's so many artists here in this room that could tell me what the role of the artist is. So this, for me, is just an idea, just a beginning. Much of the artist's obligation is the work of slowing down. Artists are encouraged to slow themselves down to capture a scene or emotion from a place of internal calm, even if what the artist is trying to capture is not calm, if it exists in a state of fury or chaos. I still believe that the artist must capture what they're seeing from a place of internal calm. This is in part what delight speaks to. In Bermuda, there is a distinct rhythm to our upbringing, which to me is the delight of slowing down. Our approach to life is rhythm-based. Saunders was concerned with finding the rhythm, the pulse of life, and representing it. He was determined to put our collective heartbeat onto black and white display. To be Bermudian is undeniably about calling on finesse, no matter your age, whilst bound up in the pursuit of going slow. For me, Saunders' work epitomizes the best of what it means to be us, the best of what it means to be Bermudian. This is the work of going slowly while reveling in the beauty of interrogating the things you think nobody else sees, that chicken in the bush that nobody else saw on your walk this morning. He teaches us that the artist must act with compassion and with curiosity, to find themselves in constant awe of the people and the events around them. The role of the artist is not very different from the role of being a good person, a good friend, or a good partner. The role of the artist is to act in cahoots with love, with a keen attention to the way that love heals and the way that love can heal. If we slow down and we sharpen our ability to notice our hearts, I guarantee you, unexpected instances of delight will become surprisingly available to us. Which brings me to hopefully a short story. I was at Riddles Bay a few weeks ago, and I had set myself the challenge of taking a beach chair, sitting in Riddles Bay for 10 hours, and writing. If I wasn't writing, I had to sit there and I had to notice whatever that meant to me on the day. No technology, no anything, just me, my thoughts, my journal, and a pen. And I had been sitting there for a while because I was inspired by Saunders and his practice, I guess, of getting to know the people and the places that he photographed before he did so. So in Riddles Bay, I know what time the herons come out. I have my favorite pockets of shade. If you've been there recently in the last 2 years, you'll know that there's now a hill in the middle that looks like a wedding cake to me with Bermudian cedar sort of gates all the way around. You can look for these things. I promise I'm not lying to you. I say this because the park and I are no longer strangers the same way that Saunders and his subjects were no longer strangers when he captured them. I'd been sitting in the park for maybe 3 hours. I got there at 6, and must have been about 9, and I heard somebody sneeze. And so in true Bermudian fashion, and for fear of bad karma, I said, "Bless you." I looked around and I couldn't find anybody, but I was confident that I had left my blessing there for somebody to collect. I was writing, I was napping because I can't stay awake for very long without taking a nap. And somebody comes up to me, all angry, trying to mash me out. I said, "Okay, whoa, what's going on?" He said, "You're in my spot." I said, "This is everybody's spot, it's a park." And he said, "You're in my spot, I'm gonna call the police." And I said, "Okay, there you go, you went and did it. Remember, this is Emancipation, right? During July." So I said, "Okay," and you know what this person looked like. Great smile too, man. And I said, "Okay, I'm not trying to start any fuss." I didn't say anything. I said, "Okay, sir, I'm gonna find another spot in the park and we can do it like that." So I leave and I begin writing again. I said, "Man, this guy really pissed me off." But then I remembered I had left a blessing there for somebody to collect. And in that moment, I said, "Okay, I hope it was this man who collected my blessing when I said, 'Bless you.'" You know, I'll never know, but that's what made me feel better in the moment. The reason I say this is because back to delight enlists us to take our familiar world, sometimes our bad world, and break it into pieces. To take the fragments from a despairing moment and to glue them back together as a glimmering. So all I had to do was remember the fact that I said "bless you" to nobody, and to hope and to pray that this man was the person who sneezed. You know, it was quite easy work. I'm biased to poets and to poetry, and so I think poets do this work of the reconstitution of a moment. I think they do it exceptionally well. So how can we practice delight? This is one way, but what does that mean to you? What does the story tell you, if anything? How can we turn the pursuit of delight into a practice? How can we train ourselves to sift through the noise and to find awe? There's 3 things that I want to share with you. 3 techniques that Saunders taught me, or 3 steps rather. The first is to document, to be indiscriminate about capturing what catches your eye. The act of taking a picture, or writing a poem, or singing a song, writing a song rather, slows you down and requires momentarily your stillness. The work of externalizing what makes you feel good is core to delight, so document often. And don't worry if it's not perfect, because the important thing is volume. Take pictures all the time, right? Do whatever it is that you like to do creatively all the time. And don't worry if your first draft isn't what you'd like it to be. You have a second draft and a third draft and a fourth draft that you can always come back to. It doesn't have to be done. So what's the first step to find delay? What do you have to do? One more time. Easy. Document. The second way to make delight a practice, and this has become quite easy with social media, is to broadcast. But when I say broadcast, I don't mean social media. Put your phones away, please. When I say broadcast, I mean have a conversation with somebody. Tell somebody about your delight. Stop somebody in the street like a crazy person and be like, "Look at what I saw this morning." I was speaking to my mother yesterday, and she said, "I went to botanical gardens." I said, "Okay, nice." She said, I was walking and this woman stopped me. I said, "Oh, I already like the beginning of the story." And a woman stopped her because apparently this woman saw a Twizzy-sized blue crab in the park. And I said, "No way. Last time I saw a Twizzy-sized blue crab was last week." So that's what I mean. Broadcast. Tell somebody about your delay. So one thing that I want to do before we go any further, is I want everybody to turn to the person next to them. We're gonna do this for a minute so I can stop speaking, but I want you to tell them about a delight that you experienced today. And yeah, get awkward. I know it's uncomfortable to speak about these things sometimes, but tell somebody about a delight, please, that you experienced today. And if you can't think of a delight, in the spirit of Toni Morrison, summon her spirit, make it up, write fiction. It's okay, I'm not gonna test you, right? But do what you gotta do, okay? So everybody take a minute, catch your breath so I can catch mine, and tell somebody about a delight. Time out. All right. We're gonna slowly reel these conversations in, and I'm gonna ask one person, just one person, to either tell me what their delight was, to tell everybody what their delight was, or to share another person's delight. Because delight, it's contagious, right? Let's treat it as such. The third step that I'd like to mention is that you have to be specific, right? Avoid relying on your own cliches when you talk about your delight. I have this chronic issue where I say everything is beautiful or lovely. And so when I'm describing my delight, I know that I have to avoid using these words because it's not sincere, and people are aware of, very transparent, people are aware of my tendencies. So when I speak about my delight, I say, Yusef, don't say it's beautiful, don't say it's lovely, say something else. But to be specific, I realized that we're short on time, so we're gonna skip out on the next part of this activity. But what I was going to say and suggest is that you turn to another person and you zoom in on one detail that you spoke about the first time, and you highlight it, you say, okay, these are the textures of that moment, but you can save that practice for another person because there are always opportunities to zoom in on your delight. Okay, we're almost there, guys, I promise you. So document, write your delights down, take pictures, go for walks, do what you gotta do, but document while your delight is still fresh on your mind. That's the important thing that I didn't say before. You have to do it while it's fresh, or your delight will become stale and it won't mean anything to you days down the line, weeks down the line, and it won't mean anything necessarily to the person you're speaking to. That's not a guarantee, but it's a likelihood. Become an advocate for your delight. It'll spread to others and they'll continue this chain of joy and wonder. Lastly, what was the last step, guys? Are you listening? Yes, thank you, Cam. Be specific, right? Don't be short, don't be brief. It's okay to be long-winded when you speak. We have time. People don't do that much here. So yeah, take your time and tell somebody about the texture of your moments. I'm gonna very, very briefly speak about the silver print photography process, just to, cross my T's and dot my I's. But Saunders' work epitomizes documentation, broadcasting, and specificity. What differentiates the artist from the non-artist in matters of delight is the willingness to couple technique with documentation, broadcasting, and specificity, right? There is a certain level of skill that's asked of for the artist. Saunders is one of the best at silver print photography in the 20th century, and I'll read out what those steps are. So, it's an 8-step process. Step number 1 is film preparation. This means that the film is coated with something called silver halide, and it's put in gelatin, raspberry or blueberry, I believe. Exposure. I can't take myself seriously. Light exposure creates a latent image on the film, and all this means is that the picture you've taken, it's asleep for a little while before some other chemicals come and wake up the picture. So step number 2 is exposure. Development is step number 3. Developer reduces the exposed silver halide crystals and lets the metallic silver shine. Step number 4, stop that development. The stop bath that you put the picture in, the film in, halts the development process somehow. Step number 5, fixing. The fixer removes any of the silver halide crystals. Step number 6 is washing. You have to wash the film of any residual chemicals. Then step number 7 and step number 8 are drying. You dry it off in a clean environment. And step number 8 is printing it off, and you get the end product like you do down here. These are copies, but you get the end printed product. So this is my favorite part of the evening. underneath 3 people's seats, there is a special prize. So, underneath these seats, there is a description that corresponds to one of the images down below. So if you're one of the lucky ones with a description, I'm going to ask you to read it. 1 will read first, 2 will read second, and 3 will read third. If you're not comfortable reading this description, it's okay. I'm happy to read, or you can pass it to somebody else. I also realized that all the chairs aren't full, so if you're the lucky person to find a description, sorry, you got to read it. This will be the start of our activity. So, who has number 1? All right. Would you like a mic, sir? You're okay? Can you, if you don't mind, you don't have to, but could you stand up and introduce yourself and tell me one very, very quickly delightful thing about your day?
Here you go, sir.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, Reiko Thomas. I think the most delightful thing about my day was actually being here. I took time away from work and I came to hear you speak. So I'm delighted.
Thank you. That means
Yes.
a lot. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr.
thank you.
Thomas.
Portraiture is a challenging way to document individual lives because it relies on the single image to convey totalizing expectations about a person's identity. This is all of me, a portrait says. The image in question isn't quite haughty, but unquestionably suave. This is the unspoken mandate of a budding actor in the 60s. Terence Stamp maintained a glamorously mysterious profile. His gaze doesn't fall on Saunders, but the mirror. It's difficult to know whether he's looking at his reflection or the reflection of the camera, the kind of visual riddle befitting a movie star like Stamp.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thomas. Everybody give Mr. Thomas a round of applause, please. Thank you. And hold on to that piece of paper for me, Mr. Thomas. Lucky number 2. All right. Oh. Good evening, ma'am. No worries, no worries. Take your time. If you don't mind introducing yourself, saying one delightful thing about your day, and then reading the description that you have.
Yeah. Who better to sit upon a throne fit for the king of funk than the more myth than man James Brown? Nobody. A people's person. The juice and the squeeze. A man who summoned expressions of exuberance from crowds like a conductor of joy. He makes joy dance on the airport tarmac. Brown adopts the 3/4 gaze, a gaze that soars rather than confronts, suggesting, instead of a relation to his fans, to the present, the more ennobling abstract relation to the future, ahead of his time. Scan the faces, and the only ones not seen smiling are suppressing smiles, disbelieving that Brown, a man himself, could turn an airport into a show. Saunders did this anywhere he traveled. He humanized people. James Brown and Richard Saunders collaborate to capture the beauty of Black experiences folding into each other.
Thank you so much. And what was your name, ma'am?
Your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm very deaf. I'm
No,
sorry about
no
that.
worries.
Liz Jones.
Thank you so much, Miss Jones. Everybody give Miss Jones a round of applause, please. Third time's a charm as well. Number 3. All right. Miss Pierman, hello. Would you like a mic? And if you could introduce yourself, say one delightful thing about your day, and then read the description, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Janice Pierman, and the delightful thing of my day is waking up, life.
Yes.
The high angle makes this photograph feel like it was captured during a flyover. It has the countless altitudes of a cityscape with prescription bottles of building, all of them loosely organized into a sprawling, medically urban jungle. There's a white looming lady, the architect and the city planner. She calls your attention to the idea that maybe she had a hand in the infrastructure of this pill city. She seems unaware, if not unbothered, by Saunders' presence. If you were building a city, how much mind would you pay a photographer? The picture has a randomness, an organized mayhem that begs the onlooker to search further. Find the patterns, find the order.
Thank you so much, Ms. Prima. I really appreciate everybody reading out the descriptions. Let's give one more round of applause to everybody who did that. What I'd like everybody to do is stand up, if you could stand up. And I want you to take your sticky note and your pen, and I want you to visit the 3 images that you see down below. My only 2 instructions for you are to write something down, something you find delightful. It can be something you scribble, it can be a picture, it can be one word, but write down something you find delightful and write down the number of the picture that you're looking at. The reason you're going to know the number is because our lovely volunteers are going to put their descriptions by the pictures that they just read out. So we're going to do this for 2 minutes and 47 seconds. And the last thing that you have to do is pass your sticky note to somebody that you haven't spoken to. And that's it. Come back, sit down, and we'll finish for the evening. All right, very pleasant people, if we could come back here. Thank you. Thank you guys for doing that with me and for doing that with each other. I wish we had time to debrief the exchanges, but I trust and believe that these exchanges will be debriefed for, like I said at the beginning of the talk, days and weeks to come. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'd like to address this last section, a very short section, to our young people. And I say young people and I look at everyone because young is a disposition, it's a frame of mind and not an age. So I'd like to speak to our young creatives, and I don't invoke the term creatives restrictively. There's a prevailing assumption, not just in Bermuda, but in a lot of the world, that there are some people endowed with creativity, and that there are others who are favored by more practical skills. I am not favored by practical skills, but I know that there are people who can do both, and I know that many people in this room can do both. And to you, I congratulate. I think Bermudians are special in the way that we're raised around a natural beauty that makes all of us creative in some way. Many of us are lucky to frequently see the glimmer in our surroundings. However, for many others, that glimmer is harder to find on any given day. When young people don't see the glimmer, though, and when we don't see it enough, they leave. And there's already not very many people on this beautiful island, wonderful, great island. And so when they leave, we lose incredible talent that we should be guiding, retaining, and training, right? There needs to be opportunities for people here that don't want to work in reinsurance. Not to say anything bad about reinsurance, but we need to keep an array of people that do creative, inspiring, and alternative things, because we have international business here already. So we need to cultivate these other industries and ways of life. Despite the beauty we've been afforded here, despite the advantages of living in Bermuda, our population of young people is dwindling because our delights, first and foremost, are not being nurtured the way that they should. I'm not here to profess that delight is going to change the world or remedy systemic issues that we're facing here on the island. But I do think that the work of delight can establish a path to more consistent relief, which is what we're trying to get at today. To delight is to seek out a fleeting relief, but a relief nevertheless. It's always good to take a break. In the worst scenarios, delight can bring a sense of equanimity, a sense of endurance, a fervent belief that there will always be a thread of joy in the most difficult of times. Our collective job is to make sure that we can all identify that thread so that our young people wrap their fingers around hope. We must act on, document, broadcast, and be specific about our magic moments. And yes, that work is a privilege, but we work on behalf of each other. So when one person can't remark on the magic they see, they may be encouraged to turn to a friend like we did today and ask about theirs. I'm fortunate to be a young person talking to all of you about something that inspires me, about something that guides me to my core, something that I believe can change our community. This is my currency, but like I said, we all have our own currency, right? We need young people. My apologies. I recognize that delight is just one thing that can change our island, and I really believe, because of the people that we have here, I'm encouraged that it will be something that changes our island sooner than later. The reason retaining young people matters is because young people help refine our ability to notice. Children, now we're speaking about young people in the truest sense, children express themselves on what brings them joy without jumping through the hurdles that older people do. Children express themselves on what brings them joy because they believe it's something that is deeply important. But more than this, it's just their nature. They tell you squarely that they find whatever momentary pleasure it is so incredibly delightful. And they don't worry about the longevity or the endurance of what they've told you, because it doesn't matter. All that matters is to see that glimmer, that moment from and of light, and to pass it on to somebody else, to let them shine for a little moment of time. We need to retain our young people so we can learn from their courage to fully inhabit and share the joy of a moment. We need young people because they teach us how to notice, and notice more fearlessly. It takes courage to do this work. It takes courage to go to the gym in the morning and say hello to somebody. Like, these things, they're not lost on me, but they are important. Although Saunders spent most of his life away from Bermuda, he always knew how important young people were. He made sure it was a priority to capture them in his photography. And while you don't see that in these 3 pictures below, you will see them when you go onto the gallery's website and check out the virtual tour. He knew that it was them who provided the pulse in a place. Susan Sontag writes that the whole point of photographing people is that you're not intervening in their lives, we're visiting them. Saunders knew that we'd all benefit by being visited by children often. He knew that their pulse was deeply intertwined with our own, and that's why he photographed them, to capture our pulse. That's all the work of delight is, keeping our ears open long enough to notice our pulse, and our eyes open long enough to capture another person's. We want Bermudians to take pride in this coffee table book once it's done, and I'll tell everybody in this room once it's finished. We want children to use this book as a resource, primarily to inspire themselves to do great things in every field in Bermuda, everything, even the fields that we don't know about yet. Not to become the next Richard Saunders, no, but to assert themselves in their own right. It's my hope that the legacy of Saunders helps guide Bermudians, like it has me, to their truest ambitions. With that, I'll finish the formal part of the lecture, but there's one more thing that we have to do. I want to read you a poem about the importance of kindness and delight that my sister shared with me before I left for university 4 years ago. The promise I made today was that we'd leave this room with more questions about delight, and I sincerely hope that we accomplish that together. This has been a wonderful experience. Poem time. So this poem is called Small Kindnesses, but there's no such thing as a small kindness. And the poem is written by Danusha Lamaris. I've been thinking about the way, when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by. Or how strangers still say bless you when someone sneezes. A leftover from the plague. Don't die, we're saying. And sometimes, when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them, and for them to smile back. For the waitress to call us beloved when she sets down our bowl of fish chowder, and for the driver in the pink taxi to let us pass. We have so little of each other left, so far from tribe and fire. Only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy? These fleeting temples we make together when we say, here, have my seat, go ahead, you first. I like your hat. A special thank you to everyone involved in this project so far, to all of you for coming here tonight, and may we continue this work of delight. Thank you.